Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into the experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. We have a very topical discussion today, product management and AI. We hear a lot about AI these days, artificial intelligence. According to McKinsey, AI technologies are projected to increase labor productivity by up to 40%. And executives are highly optimistic in its potential. 80% believe that artificial intelligence improves worker performance and creates jobs. But frankly, not all of us know a lot about AI, and specifically how we in product management will need to understand, embrace, and utilize it. Our guest is an expert on AI, and he is here to share his thoughts on how AI is going to impact product management and how product managers and product leaders can leverage AI for the betterment of their products, businesses, and their customers. Chris Butler is IPSoft's Chief Product Architect. He has over 18 years of product and business development experiences at companies like Microsoft, Kayak, and Waze. He first got introduced to AI through graph theory and genetic algorithms during his computer science engineering degree at Boston University. He has worked on AI-related projects at his startup, Complete Seating, Horizon Ventures, and Philosophy, where he created techniques like empathy mapping for the machine and confusion mapping to create cross-team alignment while building AI products. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, we're excited to hear your wisdom. So you're an expert on AI and you help companies every day understand how AI can improve their business and their products. I think some people may be intimidated by this concept of AI. Can you break it down to a basic level just to lay the foundation for this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the way I tend to approach a lot of these things is from a product or design perspective. And so that's definitely the orientation that I use for a lot of this. Most of the time when I start to explain what is AI, what is machine learning, I like to start with a lot of the myths that are out there, because there's a lot of myths when it comes to how these technologies work, what they can do, what they can't do. And so, just maybe right off the top, it's not something that you can just sprinkle into any product and then suddenly get better results, right? Like there's a lot of really amazing things that are happening today when it comes to machine learning or AI, but it's not something you can just add and then suddenly things are different. I think one of the things that I've used as a model is actually from David Robinson, who's a chief data scientist from DataCamp. And DataCamp is actually a really great place if you want to learn about the basics of implementing things like machine learning or AI. But the way he really breaks it down is that data science is really about producing insights. Machine learning is about predictions or classifications. And then artificial intelligence is something that produces actions. And now, one time I actually did a presentation to IBM Research, and they made sure that we were being clear about that machine learning is really a camp within artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence as a group of technologies or theories is something that goes all the way back to the 1950s. And all the way back then, we were just talking about what does it mean to have a system that can make more complex decisions like human beings would? And now the thing that's very interesting about the term artificial intelligence in general is that it always seems to be something that we're moving the goalposts around, right? So for a very long time, we thought that chess was one of those things that only humans could ever really do. And we found that with something like AlphaGo Zero, the machine can teach itself based on the rules and actually be better than any human or machine combination that is possible. So I think, AI is one of those things where it means to take over some amount of the decision-making that human beings actually do today. But I think I would add something on top of that. And there's a lot of different people that think about it this way too, but AI is about how do we help leverage machines to do the things that they're going to be good at or start to be good at? And then how do we now provide that information to human beings so that they can make higher level of abstraction decisions towards kind of human purpose? And so that's, I think, where there's the big delineation between machines and humans, is that humans still define what is purposeful, right? We still define what is actually meaningful in our lives. Machines are there to help us reach that end. And so artificial intelligence is really anything that would allow us to do that isn't a machine.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's an amazing observation and discussion. So when I'm talking to colleagues and others about AI, and there are all those naysayers, right? And the folks that are the sky is falling folks is how I coin them. I have a similar type of mindset that I try to share with them, which is, look, it's just going to make humans more optimal, right? And it's going to allow us to focus on the things that are in our strength and allow machines to take up some of the slack elsewhere. And I know that's going to cause some evolution along the way, and we're going to have to kind of learn how that's going to work from a macro level. But ultimately, I think it's a positive thing. So again, thank you for kind of sharing that foundation. Yeah. So do you have some?
Yeah, and actually, maybe one thing I would probably add to this too is that, when we talk about automation, it doesn't always have to be intelligent.
Sure.
If anything, a lot of the things that happen in today's world around automation tends to be based on heuristic that human beings do today, that are usually checklists or very specific steps towards some type of end outcome. And if you look at something like the CVS or the Duane Reade self-checkout line, that's an example of something where there's automation. But even though there's automation, it's not necessarily intelligent, and it's actually taking work from one person and putting it on someone else, the consumer. And so I would just say, maybe the thing that we should be worried about when we talk about the future of artificial intelligence is really more around perfect bureaucracy than some type of dystopian nightmare like the Terminator or something like that, right? It's more about the fact that we're going to be calcifying bureaucracy in some perfect way by a machine, rather than human beings still being at the forefront of what matters and allowing machines to decide what matters based on some small set of people. That to me is a bigger concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. So do you have some examples you could share with us about how organizations have used AI in their products or in their businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the things that are maybe the unsung heroes of things like machine learning or AI tend to be two things that we use an awful lot today, but we don't really realize it. And one is actually spam detection. So when I was back at Hotmail in the early 2000s, this was really the beginning of when we would start applying certain types of machine learning to reducing the amount of spam that makes it into someone's inbox. And so at first, it was very simple. We could do things like very basic pattern matching to say that this particular email is spam, so just make sure that we don't deliver any email that looks like this. Once that happens, though, human beings, being as innovative as we are always trying to find the next way to do something. And so then you start to get randomization. You get a couple different aspects of how to create spam that doesn't look like spam, but still is spam. And so that's where machine learning models have actually been employed for a fairly long time, but we may not notice it. And the second one I like to bring up is with regards to credit cards and fraud detection. So a lot of large credit card companies, a lot of large financial institutions have been using things like machine learning techniques for a very long time, almost 20, 30 years now, to be able to detect when there is fraud that's taking place. Now, there's a lot of problems with that too, because the machine learning will get good at detecting certain types of frauds and maybe not others. But those are two very classic versions of this that we probably don't really think about that much. I think the people that have been getting a lot of press for this type of machine learning and AI have been companies that focus a lot on things like recommendations. So Amazon, Netflix, they build a lot of systems that are trying to constantly personalize their services. Even Spotify, when it comes to their discovery playlists, are all trying to build algorithms that provide people with better recommendations. I would go a step further, though. The example I like to give a lot is Stitch Fix. And the reason why is that Stitch Fix does a lot of interesting things. Not only, if you're not familiar with Stitch Fix's model, Stitch Fix basically will ship a box of clothing to you with 5 or so garments. You try them on, and if you like them, you keep them. And so it behooves them to do a great job at matching garments to people. And I'm actually a big fan of theirs. I've been a user for about 2 or 3 years now. And part of that is actually the stylists themselves are human beings, but they get recommendations from the system based on, warehouses, sourcing, available garments, things like that, even sizing. Is all done through that. The part that I think is very interesting is that they are now have their own brands that are white labeled, where they look at the data of garments that are being consumed by people or being bought by people, and they're then giving recommendations about, hey, we actually need a garment that will have this style with this pattern. And it's under their brand. I think it's called 01 Algo, which is an ugly, very fitting name for this type of thing. Right. But I found that their shirts, their button-down shirts, are really amazing because they get the right fit plus patterns that I actually like. And again, I'm not exactly sure what goes on behind the scenes at Stitch Fix, but it's something that I think is a really innovative way of using machine learning algorithms, especially when we talk about loops between humans and machines, the stylist and the machine, but also sourcing, other, clothing manufacturers, things like that.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I love that example. Thanks for sharing. I too, as you could tell, love the combination of humans and machines, and I think that Stitch Fix seemingly has solved that quite well with the stylist plus the recommendation. So that's fascinating. So the next question, it's kind of a two-piece question. What is a piece of advice you would give to product leaders as they look to implement some sort of AI strategy? And secondary to that, maybe coupling with that, is what's a common mistake you see organizations make in this world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of the time when I give advice around building systems that include machine learning or AI within them is that you really need to understand what is the key problem you're solving and what are the outcomes you want. And so this is something that I think, gets back to product management 101, or should be product management 101, is really, how are you defining what success looks like for the customer, or for the, if it's a B2B, the business or enterprise that you're building something for. And I think we get away from the fact, and this is maybe related to one of the mistakes, is that we tend to think that machine learning is some type of all-encompassing brain or thing that you just implement and suddenly everything will be better. But there's a group within Google that talks a lot about human-focused or human-centered machine learning, and the machine is not going to be there to help you decide which problem to solve. Right. And when we talk about the way that machine learning works in particular, it's usually trying to reduce error based on an algorithm towards some type of what we'll call loss function or outcome. And so the issue there is that you really need to take good care in defining that. And this is related to a larger kind of AI problem that's referred to as the value alignment problem, which is that we may be able to specify in particular a type of metric that we want to optimize. But when it comes to human needs, when we talk about what's a great product, it's never just one metric, right? There's never just one value that you can optimize, minimize, or maximize that will get you the perfect solution. And so I think trying to get people to think about satisficing rather than satisfying a bunch of different metrics that are both leading and following indicators for customer success is really, really important in this case. So that's one of the things. And I think the other mistake a lot of people make is that they try to go too overboard with creating something that is using cutting edge research. And there's actually a big issue within the research community right now around just kind of replicability of these types of things. And so even though there may be research papers that talk about a cutting edge piece of research, it doesn't always mean you can apply it to real world problems and create solutions out of that. So I'd say starting very simple, right? And the way I think about starting simple really ends up being, how do you first validate the problem you're trying to solve, right? Second, how do you validate what a perfect solution would look like? And a lot of the time that's through prototyping. Actually, at Philosophy, we focused an awful lot on building out prototypes of machine learning systems before we even built the machine learning system. And so a lot of that time is well spent because you're validating both the problem and the potential solution. And then from there are ways that you can break off pieces of this problem to prioritize, to better understand kind of the uncertainty that you have about different aspects of the solution, as well as where do you need to start collecting data? How do you need to start cleaning that data? What does that data actually mean? And so those are all really key aspects of how we build out these types of systems. But going overboard with trying to build something that is really cutting edge will not always help you.
Yes, thank you so much for that advice. I think that is imperative for our listeners to remember and understand, and that is to stick to those foundations of product management. It is imperative to uncover the core need, validate the real problem before we ever start to apply a solution or a technology. And I think we all as product managers need to keep that in mind and remember that as we're going through our jobs. It's especially difficult to remember when we're working with a technology such as AI, where there are so many potential implications and ways to apply it, that we often try to find a problem to fit the solution. And I think it's just imperative that we get back to the fundamentals of product management and look for that need first. So thank you again for sharing that. I think it's important for our listeners to understand, and myself included. I think we all fall into that rut at times. So speaking of, one of the core tenets of product management is empathy, as you and I both know, truly understanding those users' needs from the very beginning of any process. So do you think having AI embedded so heavily in a product, or in the product management process for that matter, will lead to an empathy gap? If so, what do you think we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think empathy is a really interesting term. It's one of those things that was really, really front of, at first it was very top of mind for a lot of product people over the last couple of years. I've seen a lot of interesting research about empathy and about how actually as human beings we can frankly just turn it on and off. And so to me, I guess the way that I would think about this more is that as human beings, we should be compassionate towards other human beings that need to get something done. Right. Or they have like some life goal that they want to achieve. And so the biggest issue I see, especially when we talk about how you build something that is, say, human centered or user centered, is that we will build systems that will make a lot of decisions, but won't give the ability for people to either escalate, opt out, or disagree. And so that's where I think the classic tools of how do you go and understand the way people actually get the job done today and what they want from a solution is partially about like just how does it fit into their workflow? How do you learn from them to build these types of systems that can make the types of decisions for them? But the times where we're not actually empathetic, if we think about it from, say, a design thinking standpoint, those times are where we don't allow the human being to intervene in some way. Because for these types of solutions, there's always complex circumstances that come into play. And so there was a really great article in The Verge about this where for Medicare, Medicaid, there was a system that they had implemented in a couple different states that would automatically assign the number of hours a particular beneficiary would get for certain types of illnesses or, kind of needs. And so the problem is that one year it was all done by caseworkers that were actually human beings. And then the next year it was done by a machine. And the caseworkers and the people that were being affected by this would usually get their, in some cases would get their hours reduced. And there was no way for them to disagree with that. Even though it was not the right, even though it was not the right thing for that machine, even though it was not the right thing for that person, they ended up having to take a lot of these states to court. And in the end, it was just because there was a mismatch in the type of rules that were being implemented in this heuristic, intelligent action-based system. And so, I think that's the biggest concern I have is that we're not drawing the system boundaries, so to speak, wide enough to include the people that are impacted. Right? Like there's no such thing as a human out of the loop system when we talk about AI. It just means that we're not including the people that are actually impacted. And I would say this extends even to when we talk about militaries starting to look at things like, AI on the battlefield, there's always someone being shot at. Right. And I think if anything has been shown by how, say either Iraq or like Afghanistan has gone, the military has made, real strides towards no longer just thinking about it in a kinetic or physical sense, but how do we, John Boyd is a military strategist that I have a lot of respect for, created the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, act. Really is kind of the proto thinker from my standpoint for agile thinking. And he had always talked about how warfare is not only physical, but it's also mental and moral. And so when we talk about this, we need to be encompassing all of the people that will be impacted by something. And that is the way that we actually build AI or machine learning systems that help us rather than hurt us, right? And so maybe the simplest way is just having a capability that I can say, hey, I disagree with this. right? I want a human review. And if you look at a lot of the way that IPSoft does their intelligent agents, it's really the goal to create the right teaming between Amelia, which is the intelligent agent, and then the ability to escalate to real human beings, right? So I think that's maybe a key aspect when we talk about empathy within these systems. It's making sure that we're really actually listening to the people that are being impacted by the decisions that these systems make.
Absolutely. A great way to wrap up this wonderful conversation, remembering that it's all about the user. And our customers will always need to have our ear and provide feedback on what decisions are made for them by machines and by our products in general, for that matter. So thank you again so much, Chris Butler, for sharing your vast wisdom with us. I hope you'll come back and join me again, as there is so much to discuss on this great topic.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much breadth in this topic. Like I would even just say we should definitely eventually talk about trust, interpretability. These are all things that are really key when we talk about building out AI systems from a product perspective. So thank you very much for giving me the chance to at least explain a little bit of it.
You bet. Thank you again. So thank you for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.